Hello amigos, Chout here, and welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about a content creator named Sargon of Akkad, a very big and prominent voice in the online skeptic community. If you've been involved in the anti-SJW sphere of YouTube, you've probably heard the phrase, anti-SJWs are the new SJWs, a sentiment that has been growing as a response to a lot of anti-SJWs acting like SJWs, and doing things that they themselves criticized SJWs for doing. Well, Sargon of Akkad uploaded a video called Anti-SJWs are the new SJWs. This one is before he got his spray tan, so it's from quite a while ago, in which he defines what an SJW is, and why he thinks that anti-SJWs are not the new SJWs. And when I watched it, it actually amazed me how many things that make up what an SJW is that he himself had listed actually apply to him or other anti-SJWs. So in this video, I will be showing how Sargon of Akkad is an SJW by his own standards. So let's begin.
So I follow a Facebook page called Alternative Left, and they posted this. Apparently we've become the new SJWs. I don't think these people know what an SJW is. It's not someone you disagree with, it's someone who will try and ruin you for disagreeing with them. They are moral authoritarians.
You're a dick, Anita. Everyone knows you're a dick.
He looked into the camera.
That's
harassment.
Do you want to know something? I've spoken to a lot of interesting people recently since I've been here.
Yeah.
A lot of people who know you personally, Anita, and they say everyone hates you because you're a dick.
Oh, this is getting mean.
I don't think Dave Rubin does this. And I know I don't do this. But the problem is you're concerned more about the right, aren't you? Well, I'm sorry, I just don't see the right as being a threat to Western civilization at the moment. If the right had been completely taken over by the alt-right, if the alt-right steamrolled right-wing politics, Donald Trump was it was Jared Taylor who'd taken over the Republican Party, and they'd taken office and they were starting to do all the kinds of things that they would love to do. Holy fuck, dude, I would be doing nothing but videos about it.
Jared fucking Taylor and the alt-right taking office. That's what it would take for Sargon to start criticizing the right. And that's pretty easy for him to say, because trust me, Sargon, if Jared Taylor and the alt-right took over, your channel would be banned at best and you would be dead at worst.
My goal with this video is simply to point out some of the hypocrisy in the anti-SJW community.
Okay, but hypocrisy isn't the problem. Everyone's a hypocrite to some degree. Hypocrisy is not what makes an SJW an SJW, so why did you call us the new SJWs?
That's not the argument being made. No one is saying that hypocrisy is what makes an SJW an SJW. Of course, being a hypocrite in the general sense does not make you an SJW. It's what you're being hypocritical about. And there are different degrees of hypocrisy as well. For example, it's not entirely intellectually honest to act as if wanting to stop climate change but still throwing a Snickers wrapper on the grass, and calling yourself a free speech advocate and then saying this.
Just for a start, just arrest every single ACAB Facebook group member. Just investigate them.
Are the same degree of hypocrisy.
What began as a liberal backlash against social justice
is still a liberal backlash against social justice. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, carry on.
No. Some of the backlash may have come from a liberal place. I won't deny that. But that's not enough to say that the backlash itself was liberal. But from my understanding, it was a mostly conservative backlash, since social justice is anti-conservative. It is in their best interest to conserve the social status quo, and the idea of social justice interferes with that, since it challenges the status quo.
Kind of morphed into what is essentially a conservative safe space.
But how is that like the SJWs?
How are safe spaces like the SJWs? I don't know, Sargon, you tell me. What relation could these two things possibly have?
Even if that was true, That's not the same problem. No one was criticising the SJWs because they wanted to go off and have chats about far-left ideology in their own safe spaces. Nobody gives a shit if they do that.
Problem with a safe space. Problem with safe university safe spaces are dangerous.
The problem is they won't leave other people alone.
This is just fucking magnificent. Ah yes, conservatives. The ones known for leaving other people alone. And it doesn't even have to be just conservatives. Anti-SJWs sure had fun not leaving Milo Stewart and Riley J. Dennis alone. Two trans YouTubers that made videos that never really targeted anyone in particular. But guess what? To this day, they are still not fully being left alone. And that's not even counting all the other smaller trans YouTubers who have had their lives ruined as a result of anti-SJWs making videos on them. I'm talking death threats, getting harassed in public, and even doxing.
And you can kind of see where I'm going with this. With the anti-SJW community, I think as more and more people jumped on the bandwagon, the audience pool became skewed farther and farther to the right.
It was never exclusively left-wing. And maybe like the audience has got more right-wing over time. Who knows? I mean, people's political positions aren't just fixed in stone. I mean, I have moved further to the centre than I was from the left. I'm a centrist. I'm not a right-winger either. And there's no right-winger watching this who's going to go, yeah, Sargon's a right-winger. He's definitely one of us. But they are going to say, I have disagreements with Sargon. But on a principle level, on what we are doing as a civilization and the way we should run our nations, I would rather sit in a room with a centre lefty like Sargon than a far lefty like any socialist or any intersectional social justice warrior. Because I'm not going to try and fuck their lives up over a discussion.
Oh, really, Sargon? Is that why they'd rather talk to you as opposed to any far-left person? I mean, there are plenty of far-left people, or I guess it depends on what you'd consider far-left to be, but somehow I don't think that leftists like ContraPoints or Riley Grace Rochon or Hassan Piker are gonna call your job to get you fired after talking to you. And of course any right-winger who you've talked to is not gonna care that you have some disagreements with them, because you barely ever talk about them. I mean, on your channel you mainly complain about the left. I think with the kind of influence that you have, the right probably views you more as a useful idiot. I mean, Richard Spencer has already called you a great entry point. And also, of course, a right-winger would rather talk to you as opposed to a far-left person, because you are closer to their ideology. I don't know where you get the idea that it is because you are supposedly not going to fuck their lives up. They agree with you more, and so they would rather talk to you. What a shocking revelation. Also, you may not be trying to fuck their lives up, but when it comes to the alt-right, trust me, they won't and have not treated you with the same respect. But we'll get to that later.
I actually believe in that thing, but I mean, I'm not saying you don't. I'm sure you do. You're like the alt-left. You're angry at the SJWs too because they cucked you. And they didn't cuck us. They tried, but we're now the insurrection. But I guess now, we're the new SJWs. Quick, we're going to stop you from doing everything that you do. Censor this man. Block him. Exactly. Do you see how silly that sounds? Create block bots for the alt-left.
Yes, Sargon, that does sound silly. First of all, censor can literally mean anything from the government arresting you for criticizing them to bleeping out swear words in the news. And then you lump in someone using their freedom to block you. If someone blocks you, how does that stop you from doing everything you want to do? Unless you, for some reason, really need to tell your opinions to someone who has made it clear that they don't want to hear them. You are not entitled to their attention. That's why I found it so funny when people like Armored Skeptic freaked out over H-Bomber Guy creating that block bot. Only the people who hate you are using them anyway. Why do you want people that hate you to watch your videos? I mean, YouTube already has such a feature anyway. Harry's idea just works better. Sargon is the type of guy to send dick pics to a girl, and then when he gets blocked he cries, "My free speech!"
and became a way for conservatives to take the high ground, so to speak.
You gave it away. The left absolutely gave away the high ground when it started opposing free speech.
Just arrest every single ACAB Facebook group member.
When did they start doing that? Don't get me wrong, I get what he's alluding to, but I do not buy this idea that the left is anti-freedom of speech. If anything, they're anti-freedom of speech. They're anti-people using their speech to advocate for fascism, which is anti-freedom of speech. But the problem is you guys never believe them, because you guys have set the standards so low to the point where they literally need to proclaim themselves fascists in the most serious manner possible to be considered fascists by you guys.
When it started opposing like racism and sexism and then just claiming special privileges. Oh well, we can't be sexist or racist, have some special pleading on our part.
You're literally doing that right now. Oh, we can't be SJWs, you know, this group that we've declared the worst people on the planet? No, only if a literal white supremacist and the alt-right take over the country can we be SJWs.
I posted on Facebook the other day, don't call Antifa fascists. They're not fascists. It's inaccurate, it's not only, I mean, it's not just demeaning, but it's just wildly inaccurate. You should try to be as accurate as possible. Calling us SJWs just is really inaccurate. You can say, oh, they're conservatives. Okay, well, I mean, I can see why, from the position of someone quite far out on the left, that they would look at the way the sort of centre liberals are sort of moving towards the centre, right? The left liberals are moving towards the centre and saying, right, well, they're right-wingers, they're conservatives now. I can look at that and go, okay, from your point of view, yeah, I really believe it does look like that.
You're making it sound like these two things are mutually exclusive. Someone can be both a conservative and an SJW. Unless you want to start giving out special privileges again. Okay, so now let's make it clear what exactly we're talking about when we talk about SJWs. Because if some of you still remember, I actually foreshadowed this video in part 3 of how I grew out of my cringy anti-SJW phase. Which is a vague, meaningless term, by the way. I know I tried to describe it in the beginning, but it was really fucking hard. Because it's just an add-on. No one knows what it means. But I'll save that for another person. I mean, not to bring this video series up constantly, but I think it does need to be mentioned that I already did define what an SJW was, but something was off about that definition. It came from Wikipedia, and since I know that Sargon has a hate boner for wiki citations almost as big as his hate boner for Anita Sarkeesian, I will try to be a bit more nuanced. So now I will be explaining why the term SJW is an incredibly flawed term, and it actually shows the anti-SJW's true colors, and it exposes what they're really doing when they complain about SJWs. Whether intentionally or not, they are promoting conservatism. So SJW stands for Social Justice Warrior, and social justice is the relation between individuals and society measured by comparing distribution of wealth differences from personal liberties to fair privilege opportunities. And most people, when they hear that, will notice that on its own there's nothing really wrong with social justice. I mean, Martin Luther King was a social justice warrior. Some examples of social justice are climate change, healthcare, refugee crisis, racial injustice, income gaps, gun violence, and hunger and food insecurity. Good causes to be fighting for. I think any moral person would agree with that. But whenever anti-SJWs get challenged on this, their response is always something along the lines of, oh well, we're not against real social justice, we're against fake social justice warriors. Those that label themselves social justice warriors but then focus on things that aren't really issues, like manspreading. This response comes more so from edgelord anti-SJWs, not necessarily non-progressive anti-SJWs, you know, Chris Reagan type of anti-SJWs. We'll get to the conservative anti-SJWs later. The problem with this is that, if that's the case, then why call them social justice warriors in the first place? If they're not real social justice warriors, then Why give them that credit? This only causes unnecessary confusion, and this confusion has real-world negative consequences as well, because anti-SJWs rarely clarify their position on this, if not never. And I do not want to pull the audience card, but a lot of these people do have very young, impressionable audiences. And by roping in these young people who are often very apolitical and know next to nothing about politics with edgy humor and memes, you have to realize that you are the ones introducing them to political concepts like social justice. This is probably the first time they've ever heard of the term social justice warrior. And as a result, you've now turned tens of thousands of people against social justice, a cause that you claim to not be against.
Many of us don't even really identify as anti-feminist or anti-SJW. We really just kind of use that name to address our community, our sphere of YouTube, for the sake of convenience and communication.
And as a result, these people who will start voting eventually will be less sympathetic to social justice causes like the ones I just listed, and will be a lot more sympathetic to conservative causes that run in position to the social justice ones. Is that really what you want? Because at one point, you gotta make a decision. Now let's talk about the more conservative anti-SJWs. If I'd have to be as charitable as possible, I'd say that conservatives will often say that there is no necessity for social justice because there are no social injustices. Now, it is no coincidence that this position is very similar to those who were against Martin Luther King back in the 1950s. But there are clearly still a lot of social injustices, such as income inequality in black versus white neighborhoods. Most conservatives recognize that income inequality exists. That income inequality is a social injustice. The only thing that conservatives are proposing is not that it's not a social injustice, it's that the cause of this inequality is not what the social justice warriors or progressives are making it out to be. That it's not caused by systemic racism, but instead caused by a lack of fathers in the home. Which is a myth, by the way. Black fathers are still in the home. They're just not marrying, because they don't have the money to do so, because, you know, income inequality. This is usually followed by conservatives advocating for traditional marriage, which is part of the status quo. And the idea that there are no social injustices is what helped the conservatives uphold that status quo for centuries. Most of the social justice causes of today directly challenge old ideas that conservatives try to, well, conserve. Climate justice goes against the idea that there is no global warming. Gun control challenges the Second Amendment. And income inequality goes against the conservative idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, this isn't to say that if you're a conservative, you can never advocate for social justice causes like climate justice. There are plenty of conservatives that believe in global warming. My point is simply that conservatives who advocate for social justice are doing so despite being conservatives and not because of it. But Chautfi, I hear you say, you just said that being an SJW and being a conservative are not mutually exclusive. If that's the case, then how can social justice be anti-conservative? Well, I already established that when anti-SJWs criticize SJWs, they're often not criticizing real social justice warriors, but fake ones. And I hate to do this, but social justice warrior is a pejorative term used for an individual who promotes socially and progressive and liberal views, including feminism, civil rights, gay and transgender rights, and multiculturalism. Now, excuse me for citing Wikipedia, but I think we can all agree that those are all causes that line up with what so-called social justice warriors fight for. But the accusation that somebody is an SJW carries implications that they are pursuing personal validation rather than any deep-seated conviction and are engaging in disingenuous arguments. Now, I think you'd have to have your head really far up your own ass if you can't at least agree that those things can also apply to conservatives. Also, I find it pretty funny that Sargon genuinely thinks that no right-winger would confuse him for a right-winger or a conservative. Really, Sargon? No right-winger? Not a single one? I mean, it would obviously have to depend on what they've seen of you. What do you think right-wingers will think of you when they see this interview?
We might have a duty to Western civilization to at least do something to continue it. And I think that procreation is one of those. Well, men have a duty to defend the country. So if the Germans invade, well, yeah, you have a duty to sign up and go to war. And women also have a duty to have children, do they not? By this, it's a man's duty to get married and have children and provide for that family. I guess you would call me a Republican in America.
But let's get back to Sargon's definition of what an SJW is.
It's someone who will try and ruin you for disagreeing with them.
With this, he's obviously referring to cancel culture. Well, I can give you numerous examples of anti-SJW/right-wing cancel culture.
Republican Representative Jeff Fortenberry tried to get a professor fired for liking a tweet of a vandalized sign that called him Jeff Fartenberry. Incidentally, my favorite childhood cereal. 1 million galaxy brain Christian homophobes called for the Netflix Gay Jesus Christmas special to be banned.
This is a call for Netflix to man up and realize how stupid this is, how unbelievably blasphemous this is, and pull the show.
Hey, right-wingers don't celebrate when the left get canceled, right? Because they hate that stuff, and they would have to be huge hypocrites too. Oh, of course they do. Like they did with this random account when they got fired from NASA for unknowingly telling a former NASA worker to suck their dick and balls. Yeah, they really, really, really love that. And yes, that does go on for just about infinity. Anti-cancel culture crusader Count Dankula's followers were pretty freaking ecstatic to learn that the woman that they dubbed Dear Girl got fired from Twitch. When Kaepernick kneels in solidarity with BLM, patriotic viewers are free to boycott. That's just the American way. Hashtag freedom. But the left pretty much does the same thing when the CEO of Goya says Trump is awesome, and suddenly cancel culture is rearing its ugly head, canceling Hispanic food, and liberal terrorists are suppressing stuff. Hashtag what the fuck happened to James Woods? Hey, there's a job board now that's just for employers who do not want to employ woke people. That's canceling cancel culture with cancel culture. Think about it. Hey, you know Gab, that awesome free speech platform that all the Nazis love? Yeah, they ban porn and flag burning. Better move to Parler. That's the real free speech Twitter alternative. That also bans porn and poop. But hey, Milo's on there. What's he up to? I don't want to end cancel culture. I want more of it. Hey, remember how much the right loved Chick-fil-A because they gave to hateful homophobic charities? Are you triggered, liberals? Well, since they stopped giving to anti-LGBTQ charities, now they're cancel culture. Now they're Judas Iscariot. Now they betrayed us, at least according to Charlie Kirk, who himself was betrayed by Mark Dice for supporting same-sex adoption. No more Charlie Kirk. But he was also betrayed by multiple crowds of groypers.
How does anal sex help us win the culture war? I'm gonna let the gay man
answer. Wait a minute.
Along with Donald Trump Jr.
No, it's because you're not making your parents proud by being rude and disruptive and discourteous. We are happy to answer a question.
And they're headed by Nick Fuentes, who, according to him, was betrayed by Big Tech, and who also calls for the murder. And yeah, I would say that that's a form of cancellation of media globalists.
Funds the media. Globalists. Time to kill the globalists.
Nick Fuentes and his fellow groypers also terrorized the hell out of this TikToker, threatening her with home invasion and murder, all for criticizing him in TikTok. Truly, the worst humiliation a human being can endure. How about Alex Jones and Roger Stone trying to out the identity of a Trump trial juror? How about this teacher who was fired for tweeting that she'd pay people to cough on Trump? How about 76% of 8,500 Blaze followers thought Don Lemon should be fired for mocking Donald Trump? How about the unknown but presumably very high number of trans individuals who have been fired for decades until they finally received Supreme Court protections this year? How about this woman who was totally taken out of context, hounded, and fired for saying this?
The next person who has the sheer nerve to say all lives matter, I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you, and while you're struggling and bleeding out, I'm gonna show you my paper cut and say, my cut matters too.
Okay, so I wouldn't put it that way, but it's clearly an analogy, and all these right-wing crybabies insisted it was a legit threat, she got fired, and they savored her tears. Again, hashtag what the fuck is wrong with James Woods? I gotta say, this is just about a bottomless topic here. I mean, I have a huge folder that has folders that have folders of examples, and that barely even scratches the surface.
So now that we've established that social justice isn't a bad thing, and that when SJW gets used as a pejorative term, it's about the implications of how they act rather than what a person is advocating for, except when it gets used by conservative anti-SJWs, which Sargon is arguably also a part of. I also want to say that Sargon actually agrees with this definition.
And to be honest with you, I kind of like defining SJW by the way they act rather than the thing that they're advocating for.
Also, remember when Sargon said an SJW is not someone you disagree with?
Yeah, sure. I'm just curious. Do you consider somebody like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, are these SJWs to you, or...?
Not to me personally, but that's because I agree with their philosophy.
Moving on. One of the biggest reasons I think that Sargon hates the phrase anti-SJWs are the new SJWs is because it implies that the anti-SJWs are doing something wrong. Something of enough significance that it warrants criticism. And when it comes to that criticism, Sargon wants to be on the defense, and not the offense. If an anti-SJW gets criticized, he will always defend said anti-SJW. It's pure partisanship. To him, it's not what you criticize them for, it's the fact that you criticize them. And that's a cowardly mindset if I've ever seen one.
This is why I don't really like going after other anti-SJWs. I just don't see it very productive, even if I disagree with them on a bunch of stuff.
Even if I disagree with them on a bunch of stuff. You know, just a bunch of stuff. Just some minor disagreements that don't really matter. You know, like whether or not victims enjoy their rape.
I am aware that the vast majority of women, when raped, reach sexual climax.
They are not the strong people in the negotiation.
I find this ironic since literally 3 seconds ago he said this.
People forget that it was a very different situation back when, in like 2014, when we started talking about all of this. Like, no one could talk about feminism. You'd be in trouble. You'd be in unbelievable trouble. And that's why one of the main sort of like sources of pressure against feminism came from. Why so many people were interested in like talking about it and deconstructing it and having it refuted. It was everywhere and it was going unchallenged broadly, and the people who were challenging it were come after. And it was people like me and then like later on like Shu and Skeptic and Chris who who had complaints about the way that intersectionality was working, and we sort of changed the game. We made it culturally acceptable to talk about social justice. And now loads of people are, and good. That's excellent. The more voices, the better. It all counts in my opinion. And
okay, so they're not the strong people, but they're strong enough to inject such significant cultural change. Alright, gotcha.
You're not speaking truth to power when you do a video about Black Pigeon Speaks. And Kraut, I am talking about you.
See, Sargon doesn't care about the truth. He only cares about power. Who are the powers, Sargon? Bedroom feminists? Godsy Kotso? Oh, but not Black Pigeon Speaks, who has 500,000 subscribers and makes way more money than those people combined. And also actually gets taken way more seriously and gets about 200 times the views as Godsy Kotso. But that all counts for nothing, I guess.
Just make good content, man. You know you're capable of it.
That video that Kraut made about Black Pigeon Speaks was without a doubt good content. It was well made, and anyone who watched that video, including myself, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can judge for yourself, will see that that video was incredibly well edited. You can genuinely tell that a lot of research went into it. In fact, I think anyone who would see that video, regardless of if they agree with it or not, would be able to say that that video was well made. But the real reason why Sargon doesn't consider it good content is simply because it's criticizing his side. And it's also definitely speaking truth. The real reason why Sargon doesn't refute anything that was in Kraut's video is because he can't. Because he knows that Kraut is right. But once again, Sargon doesn't care about the truth. He only cares about who has the power. Which, once again, he's wrong about. But honestly, I kind of understand why he doesn't criticize other anti-SJWs like Black Pigeon Speaks. There's something to be said about when people talk about those who you cannot criticize, and who those people are. You shouldn't trust what they say, because the real people you can't criticize, they don't talk about. Because you can't criticize them. And this couldn't be more true of Sargon of Akkad. In the beginning of the video, Sargon defined an SJW as someone who will ruin you for disagreeing with them. And I don't think this could be any more true for the alt-right. So, Sargon will go on and on about being blocked by some feminist on Twitter, or being called a garbage human by Anita Sarkeesian, but he won't talk about how it was the alt-right who got him banned from Patreon. He won't talk about how the alt-right has called the school of Sargon's children as a means of intimidation. He won't talk about how they spam pictures of dead babies to his wife. He won't talk about Ethan Rell celebrating Sargon's miscarriage. No, Instead, he goes back to doing what he always does, blaming everything on the SJWs. This vague, vapid boogeyman that only really exists in the scary, powerful way the anti-SJWs make them out to be in their heads, when in reality, it's the alt-right who controls YouTube. But when this gets brought up, no one takes it seriously. Usually, the rebuttal to this would be to vague gesture at the supposed radical anti-racist SJWs. They'll say something along the lines of, everywhere people virtue signal about not being racist, and if you say the N-word, you'll get cancelled. There's an overwhelming amount of anti-racism on YouTube. But what these people fail to understand is that public perception works way better than being loud and intimidating. When someone gets cancelled for making an offensive joke, to most YouTube viewers, it's the people doing the cancelling that look bad, not the person who made the joke. If anything, this works in the alt-right's favor. Say racism is wrong and run through the usual arguments that not only everyone has already heard, but some are even getting tired of, such as, we are all part of the human race, slavery is bad, look at the crazy Nazi guy, doesn't he look crazy and angry? This is what Nazis look like, everyone, they can't be polite and well dressed. No, only look out for Nazis that look like this. Do that and the alt-right will gladly leave you alone. Because honestly, you're doing more harm than good to your own cause. But make a concise video series debunking actual race realist pseudoscience with strong arguments that are rooted in science and go after the people spreading said racist pseudoscience and expose their association with genuine white nationalist organizations. They're out for blood. There's also a really good video by Discord Spies about how the alt-right has Discord servers that send out dislike bots to videos that criticize them, and run mass flagging campaigns, and even look up the IP addresses of leftists to dox them.
Grundsätzlich wisst ihr wahrscheinlich alle inzwischen, dass wir vorhaben, ja, sowas wie Trollstürme oder wie auch immer ihr das nennen wollt, auf
konstruktive Kritikstürme, pass auf, ja.
Konstruktive Kritikstürme auf verschiedene Ziele durchzuführen. Lasst niemals irgendwelche Rückschlüsse auf diesen Server kommen. Grundsätzlich kann man dies, ihr habt jetzt gleich gesehen, wir sind jetzt auf dem Server so rund 1000, ich muss noch mal gucken.
1250, glaube ich, waren es.
1268 wurde mir gerade angezeigt, so viele sind wir gerade. Das klingt jetzt wenig, wenn ihr überlegt, ihr habt jetzt ein YouTube-Video mit 200.000 Aufrufen oder sowas und jetzt kommen da 1000 Likes oder Dislikes dazu. Das ist jetzt nicht so unbedingt so viel. Das kann man aber relativ leicht multiplizieren, indem jeder von euch sich, ja, wir nennen es mal Brandkonten oder Fake-Accounts oder nennt es wie ihr wollt, wer angeht, es mir nicht mag, einen Brandkonten erstellt und dann meinetwegen mit 5 Konten dabei geht. Dann haben wir schon die 5-fache Anzahl. Von mir aus könnt ihr euch auch 50 erstellen. Das muss jeder selber wissen, wie viel Zeit und Mühe er investieren möchte. Wie genau das vonstatten geht, wird euch gleich noch ein Offizier erklären.
Ja.
And of course that video also got taken down and after that re-uploaded and then dislike bombed. And this pushback on videos that criticize the alt-right is also reflected on Sargon's videos on the alt-right. So with that in mind, I get why Sargon doesn't criticize the right, because he'd put himself at risk if he'd do so. And that's probably also why he'll never respond to this video, because he'd have to respond to this part of the video as well. And that would break the charade that he's trying so hard to keep up. So whenever you hear him talk about how the left is taking over, try to keep this in mind. Especially when he says things like, if the alt-right took over, I would be making nothing but videos about it. He's wearing a mask, and until he takes off that mask, I don't see him criticizing the right anytime soon. Or ever, for that matter. And with that, I think I'm gonna end it. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe. Chillas!